received this message, I'm going to read it out and then I'm going to share my advice. If you have any thoughts about this, you're welcome to share in the comments. It's been 4 months of my marriage and it's difficult for me to experience pleasure through penetration. I orgasm through clitoral stimulation and I have told this to my husband as well. He does try everything to stimulate it and tries to pleasure me first, but mostly my orgasm never happens and I do it with my own hand. I don't want to do it, but I want to release myself. Kindly tell me, how can I avoid pleasuring myself with my hand? What can be the reasons? Maybe I am not aroused properly. There's an extra part to this message. Is it okay if I pleasure myself? Actually, my husband tries, but that part is so soft. He misses the point, and I think she means that he is not really stimulating the right part when he tries. And when he does it continuously, when he stimulates that part continuously, that point, that part of her clitoris gets swollen during foreplay. He tries his best, then he says you can do it yourself, because he also wants the wife, for her to be satisfied. Okay, so there is a saying that the brain is the largest sex organ. And what that means is, what is happening for you, especially for women, this applies to men too, but especially for women, what is happening mentally for you is really going to affect whether or not you are aroused, whether or not you enjoy the foreplay, whether or not the stimulation is going to feel good or not. Because your husband could be stimulating the clitoris, but if there isn't alignment mentally, that stimulation to the clitoris isn't going to feel good for you. So in terms of arousal, it's about asking yourself, what needs to happen for you mentally? What do you need to be thinking about? Because what you think about affects how you feel internally, and how you feel internally determines whether or not you're going to be aroused, whether or not you're going to enjoy the foreplay, whether or not you're going to enjoy it when he stimulates you. Now, the bits that you've mentioned in terms of it getting swollen, it's probably because constant stimulation, you're right that the clitoris is quite a sensitive area. Constant stimulation of the clitoris in a manner where it doesn't feel pleasurable for you is just going to lead it to become more and more uncomfortable. And it becomes more and more uncomfortable when there is a lack of alignment with what's happening here mentally, because what happens mentally translates into the inner emotion. The inner emotion, what you feel internally, translates into how it feels physically, how the stimulation feels physically. So they all need to be in alignment. So what does that mean? Reflect on, what do you need in order to think and feel aroused, okay? A lot of this has to do with the thoughts and feelings you have about your husband in that moment, prior to that moment, but also in that moment. So during foreplay, what are the thoughts and feelings you have about your husband? What are the thoughts and feelings you have about yourself? What are the thoughts and feelings you have about your husband's ability to satisfy you sexually? Maybe it's been a constant cycle where he has tried several times to satisfy you by him stimulating you, and because it's been a struggle previously, you've probably developed this belief that my husband is unable to satisfy me when he tries. I am only able to satisfy myself when I do it with my own hands. And because you've developed that belief, the thing you believe is what's going to be your truth, is what you're going to experience. So if you believe that your husband is unable to satisfy you when he tries, you're just going to end up getting frustrated. He's going to try and stimulate you, but because you believe that he's not able to, or he's not as good as you doing it yourself, you're then just going to get frustrated probably when he tries. It's going to get swollen, and so you end up doing it yourself. And so my advice for this is really, again, reflect on what is it you need mentally in order to be aroused by your husband, in order to enjoy the foreplay. Sometimes adding things like lubrication can help. So adding some lubrication to the clitoral area can just provide some extra sensation to make it nicer when he does stimulate you. Also, think outside the box a little bit. If he's, for example, using his hands, but he's struggling with that, it could be try other parts of his body. He could actually place his genitals on that clitoral area and stimulate you in that way. If you feel comfortable, he is also able to use his mouth, okay? So there's ways to explore things with your husband that might feel nicer when he stimulates the clitoris, again, using other parts of his body. But really the key here is the thoughts and feelings you have about your husband makes a huge difference as to whether or not you're going to enjoy it. The thoughts and feelings and beliefs you have about his capabilities to satisfy you in that way. Also, I would say you can guide him. So sometimes you've mentioned things like he's not kind of reaching the right point of your clitoris. Guide his hand. So if you think about when you touch your own clitoris, you kind of know the parts that feel really good to be stimulated. So you might want to locate the external part of your clitoris, the bits that feel good to stimulate, locate it with your own hand, and then take his hand and guide it to the same point, and maybe place your hand on top of his hand if he's using his hands to stimulate, and show him by guiding him how much pressure you need, because usually for a lot of women, they like kind of gentle pressure at the start to kind of get things going, and from that gentle pressure or gentle stimulation of their clitoris, again, remember what's happening mentally makes a difference. So really desiring your husband in that moment, mentally desiring that moment with him, really feeling desire in that moment is going to really make a difference. Gentle pressure, gentle stimulation to start with, and then as you start to enjoy that gentle stimulation, communicate with him and say you want a bit more pressure, you maybe want things to go a little bit faster. So communicate and say you want things slow to start with and then build up the pressure. So what happens here is it's going to need to require you to believe that your husband is able to satisfy you, and know that it might be that he kind of tries for a bit, I don't know for how long, maybe he tries for 5 minutes and he's feeling like, oh, it's taking too long, and so he's like, okay, just do it yourself. But realize that for women, it varies. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer. It can be in that moment, maybe he's trying the clitoral stimulation, but you're just not feeling it in that moment. So try something else, try some other positions, go back to the kissing and the touching and the massaging each other, and go back to maybe you really like for him to say certain things to you, certain words to you. Maybe you would want him to do something to you, like kind of grab you around the waist or whatever. So really just communicate what is it that will lead to you developing more and more and more desire during the foreplay. And just know that it is possible for your husband to satisfy you sexually, because you're doing it yourself and you're able to release with your own hands, but it is possible for him to learn what is it that he needs to do with his pressure and stimulation that will lead to you being satisfied sexually. I understand that you kind of stimulate yourself in order to release. You might be asking, like you asked, is it okay? If you mean in terms of Islamically, I'm not going to say, because I believe in these kinds of situations, there are so many nuances to take into consideration. It is great that your husband wants you to be satisfied, but there are differences in opinion when it comes to things like self-pleasure and self-masturbation. In the context of you being there with your husband and he's struggling to satisfy you, if that's the only way for you to experience sexual satisfaction, then I personally don't see a problem with it, because you are trying the other things, and it wouldn't be great for you to for him to only be satisfied and he's trying everything he can but you just really struggle. And if that's the only way for you to be satisfied and he's present in the bedroom, then that is fine. But in terms of in the long term, sexual intimacy is meant to be something that brings the two of you together. And so in the long term, it might cause some problems if constantly you find that the only way to satisfy yourself is through masturbation. I'm not saying that it's wrong in the context of the fact that you are married. I'm saying that it is possible. You've only been married for 4 months. It is possible for you to find a solution to this. And also just know that it's very, very common and very normal. A lot of women do struggle to orgasm or experience pleasure through penetration. That's very normal. And a lot of women do require clitoral stimulation. But please know that there are many different ways that you can explore with your husband, try different things with him, and eventually you will, through trying those different things, you will find he is able to satisfy you through that stimulation. Just believe in his ability and believe that you are worthy, as his wife, you are worthy to receive that type of pleasure and satisfaction from him.